we're in public session.
So we're in the public session now.
Right, this is,
So,
yes. Are we in public session, yeah?
Yes, yes.
That's okay.
So, reminding members that to ensure the volume on all tablet devices is off, the quickest way to do that is to press function and F8. To declare any relevant financial or other interests in relation to today's business. And reminding members and those in the public gallery that electronic devices should be turned to airplane mode, put on silent or turned off when they are in the committee, well, in the chamber. The meeting will be on camera, and members of the public wishing to access the Wi-Fi will find details in the gallery rules.
What I did.
Miss,
Yeah.
what do you want?
Oh, sorry, yes.
I mean, I would just like to raise a question just now, given that we are almost at the end of this mandate, with very, very few days left. What happens this inquiry? What's the status of it, given that the Department for Culture, Arts and Leisure will cease to exist? This committee will cease to exist?
Pardon.
Chair, it really is up to the committee. If the committee doesn't feel the inquiry hasn't completed, then it ends with the end of the committee. The committee will effectively cease to exist at dissolution. However, part of the process for transfer of function will be members discussing giving any new committees access to papers and so on. So there would be no impediment to another committee if they wanted to look at the issues. With this committee, as I say, it's for committee members to decide how they do this.
What effort was made to actually try and conclude, to bring forward the report within the mandate?
It's been
That's the terms of reference.
Chair,
Well, I think every effort has been made. Difficulty has been that so many things are difficult to get hold of, and some people are difficult to bring before the committee, as we've seen already with Mr. Kearney has sent 2 pieces of correspondence but hasn't actually appeared. So until we get evidence from folk like that, we're not able really to conclude, because as the committee agreed earlier, the role of the special advisor in a department on an issue of that magnitude is hugely important and central. So I think we've uncovered a vast amount of pertinent evidence. That has been very useful. It has put the spotlight of scrutiny on the issue, but we may not be able to reach, and will not be able, obviously, to reach a final conclusion. So it may be that, I suppose, in the next mandate, the relevant committee that would be dealing with this issue and this area of government might well wish to resume an inquiry.
Can I ask how many more or what other witnesses are going to be tried to bring before the end of this mandate?
Chair, Mr. May is scheduled for Thursday. We're trying to establish a date for Mr. Walsh.
And is Mr. Walsh, is that under oath?
Yes, he's been asked under oath or affirmation. He gets to choose which it is.
All those who were named at the meeting, as being at the
But not
meeting.
Mr. Kearney. He's not been asked under oath affirmation because he's never previously given it. That was decided at the time, Chair.
That wasn't my understanding, but I take your steer on that. We can revisit that if necessary. So even in coming without being under oath, there, he still appeared.
Sure.
So we're dealing with all of these matters as quickly as we can.
Okay.
Okay,
Can I just
Humphrey?
ask when that decision was made for other people to be brought under oath?
That was a committee discussion. It was minuted, and there was a vote on that. There was a vote on that.
Like which meeting was that?
Chair, off the top of my head, I can't recall, but it is minuted. The decision is minuted. The vote with those who voted yes and no is all minuted, because that's the process.
That is the decision for Mr. Walsh.
For the Minister and Rosalie Flagg, and I think also then for Mr. Walsh.
You're speaking about the general decision.
There was a discussion,
Right, okay.
process and a discussion, and then
Okay.
a vote.
So it was at that meeting that there was no there was no agreement that Mr. Walsh was being brought back under oath. It was actually
No, my recollection
Right,
is there was,
but
Chair. I'd have to look.
at the meeting on the 8th of March,
Oh, sorry, on the that's today. But on the
sorry, oh yeah, sorry, at the meeting on 11th of February, the committee considered the issue of bringing the Minister, former Permanent Secretary Rosalie Flanagan, back to the committee to evidence regarding the Casement Park inquiry under oath or affirmation, following evidence given to the committee by Dominic Walsh. Members agreed to bring the Minister, Ms Flanagan, back to the committee to give evidence under oath affirmation. At that meeting, as the attached minute of the meeting shows, as is outlined below.
Chair, members possibly recall there was an issue around whether or not Mr Walsh was getting papers, and that was the extra caveat with him, that he would be called back,
Oh yes, that's
assuming he got the papers.
Right,
That
it
again
just-
was minuted
yeah.
and so on.
No, I was just wondering at what point was that agreed, because there was discussion and there was resistance to bringing Mr. Walsh back under oath, and I just wondered
It-
No, no,
what
it was,
point.
Chair, it was agreed.
Could I
yes,
just say,
it
it's
was
in your
agreed.
pack for today, under the, if you look there, subject Rosalie Flanagan briefing, the background to it, the first paragraph or so contains there, and there was a vote taken, which was 6 to 3, no abstentions.
I think that was Minister Rosalie. I think with the Dominic Walsh one, there was a unanimity.
There was resistance to Dominic
Well,
Walsh.
no, because there was a caveat and there was unanimity on the. I can't recall off the top of my head, Chair. I'd have to look.
I'm
back
fairly
at the-
confident that Mr Walsh being brought back to this committee under oath or affirmation was agreed
That's
without
my
any.
understanding.
So am I, yeah.
Yes. Okay. We'll
Check.
proceed then,
Just
hopefully, to...
don't remember it happening. That's okay.
Chairman,
Yes.
can I just say, when I share the members' frustration that this hasn't been brought to conclusion. This committee's been working at this since Mr Scott's revelations in April of last year. And there are a number of reasons, I guess, for it, and perhaps more than what I'm going to state, but there's been at times a lack of cooperation from the department around these things, not making papers available, correspondence and so on.
Allegations.
There have been 2 witnesses, crucial witnesses, I think, in terms of evidence, who've not made themselves available, for example. And then, of course, I think all of this exemplified by the behaviour of the Minister in her stunt last week when asked to come back, and she read a statement out and then left without actually affording the members the courtesy of asking questions. So I would have thought, would it be the case that our work to date, when it concludes, which I think people need to appreciate in terms of the evidence and the information that's been gathered, much of it conflicting, and that's why and contradictory, and that's why we need to get certainty and clarity around these issues. And we've had a number, I think 3 in total, witnesses who will, by the end of this mandate, have come back under oath or affirmation. Because these are issues of health and safety and emergency exiting, and that continually is lost in this whole inquiry. It is about health and safety and emergency exiting. So would it be the case that whenever this piece of work's done, though it won't reach its conclusion on the floor of the House, that this piece of work will go into the legacy of this committee to be passed on to the new committee for the Department of Communities? Would that be right?
That would be, that's the will of the committee, that would be correct. It would be put into the legacy report to go to the new committee that would deal with communities.
So our job of work in the last 10, 11 months won't actually be lost. And even today, I think, we still have people, despite all the information and all the evidence that's been given to this committee, we still have people saying there must be 38,000 people in a stadium.
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Hutchins.
Mr. Hutchins.
Chair, I disagree with that. The Minister did pull a stunt last week. She sat in front of this committee for an hour and a half answering questions, and indeed...
Well, no,
Well,
actually, she didn't answer questions. That was the point.
Chair,
I must have missed that bit.
Chair, she did also feel that she was being treated very unfairly in terms of being singled out, and in terms of
Sorry, if we just point of information there, it wasn't singled out today, it's also under affirmation.
Chair, if you're not going to listen to him,
Well, that's...
At that point, she was singled out, and she, on legal advice, it wasn't just her own decision, and she made it clear. So people obviously weren't listening. She made it clear that that was the basis on which she wasn't taking questions. She did say she would be happy to come back and answer questions when she was treated equally with other witnesses. People weren't listening, and they didn't actually hear what she was saying. Now that's up to themselves.
Chairman, I think for the record,
Simple
and I
fact.
do hear interviews where it was suggested, and perhaps even from the department itself, ministers being singled out. This side of the committee have had no difficulty with any of the three witnesses who have come back, being brought back under oath or affirmation. None of them. So, and the minister has not been and was not singled out. That is simply untrue.
It's certainly not a fact. That's absolutely right. And if it's not a fact, it's
Stick
true.
with the fact.
So, I think we'll move on to our business. Mr. McMullen, right?
The minister was the only one that was asked to come here under oath or affirmation.
She was the first one.
Sorry,
She was the first one, not the only one.
was the first.
Sorry, let me finish. Until we on this side of the table asked for further witnesses that are brought onto the same. And if you read the minister's opening statement last week, she clearly stated that.
I think if members actually read the papers that were given to them for today's meeting,
Clearly don't.
actually read them before they came, then some of the misinformation that we've just heard might not have been presented to the committee this morning. The fact is, there was a decision taken, it's recorded in the minutes. I would refer members back to it, and it's very clear. We'll move on. First of all, then, apologies. None received as yet.
There may be emails or texts. Chairman.
Okay, there may be emails.
Chairman, Mr. Dunn, who has been here, we are supposed to be at Deddy today, and he's going to move in between both.
We'll share him with Debbie this morning.
Mr. McRae speaking at a conference at Wellington Park.
Okay. So, draft minutes of the meeting on the 3rd of March. Could I refer members to the hard copy tabled revised minutes of the meeting on the 3rd of March? Please disregard the minutes in the pack. There was a minor amendment made. Our members, if they've had a chance to see the tabled paper, are members agreeable that those are an accurate record of the meeting? Okay, thank you. Brings us then to the inquiry into issues around emergency exiting plans, including their impact on stadium capacity for the redeveloped Casement Park Stadium. And I could refer members to the following documents in the pack. The clerk's memo at page 10, point 31, point 32, the invitation to Rosalie Flanagan at page 14, 3.3, answer of Rosalie Flanagan's briefing of the 17th of September 2015, which is at page 16, and point 3.4, the answer of Dominic Walsh's briefing of the 20th of January 2016, which is at page 38. Could I refer members to a hard copy tabled correction to Mr. Walsh's evidence that has been submitted by Ms. Flanagan? It's hard copy tabled.
It is, Chair.
Oh, yes, sorry, right. Okay. Take a moment to look at that.
That's the SIPFA correction that you'd sent in.
All right, okay. Just that technical point there. Yeah, having to take that. Ms. Flanagan has agreed to brief the committee under affirmation. Could I remind members that the committee agreed to bring forward previous declarations of interest with respect to the inquiry? However, if there are any new declarations that need to be made, these should be articulated. So, could I welcome to the meeting Rosalie Flanagan, the former Permanent Secretary in DCAL, ask whether she wishes to make any declarations of any financial or other interests with respect to the inquiry? No. Inform the committee that we wrote to Ms. Flanagan inviting her to return to give evidence. Included in this invitation was information on the potential legal implications of giving evidence under affirmation that she knows to be false and that she may wish to take her own legal advice on this issue. Could I highlight to members that Ms. Flanagan was invited to return to provide clarification on whether or not she was aware that emergency exiting was raised as an issue of concern with respect to the proposed redeveloped Casement Park Stadium. In Ms. Flanagan's evidence to the committee on the 17th of September 2015, she indicated that she was not aware that emergency exiting was an issue of concern. In his evidence to the committee on the 28th of January 2016, Mr Dominic Walsh, the former chairperson of Sport NI, indicated that at a meeting in mid-2012, there was a conversation about emergency exiting with respect to the proposed redeveloped Casement Park Stadium, and he was assured that those issues would be dealt with. The committee also wishes to seek clarification from Ms Flanagan regarding whether or not she was aware of plans around the possibility of purchasing houses adjacent to the proposed redeveloped Casement Park Stadium. In his evidence to the committee on the 28th of January 2016, Mr Walsh indicated that the purchase of houses was mentioned at a meeting in 2012. Could I highlight that Ms Flanagan was notified in advance of the committee's reasons for taking evidence under oath or affirmation, of the potential implications of knowingly making a false statement whilst under affirmation, and that she may wish to seek her own legal advice. Ms Flanagan was notified in advance of the evidence session of the matters on which evidence is to be sought, and she was provided in advance of the evidence session with relevant evidence received from other parties. Ms Flanagan will be provided with a reasonable opportunity to put forward the facts as she understands them, or to correct or contradict other statements on relevant matters which have been made in evidence to the committee. Questioning of the evidence of the witness should remain focused on the matters notified to her in advance of the meeting. So, could I invite the clerk to provide the wording of the affirmation to Ms Flanagan, and then invite the witness to read the affirmation into the record.
I, Rosalie Flanagan, do solemnly, sincerely and truly declare and affirm that the evidence I shall give shall be truthful and honest, and that I will give the committee all information and assistance as I can to enable it to discharge its responsibilities.
Thank you indeed. If you would like to proceed with your presentation, please.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning. I'm invited to give evidence to the committee relating to contradictory evidence provided by Dominic Walsh and myself. The letter dated 12th of February 2016, which I received from the Chair and which he's just referred to, says that the committee wishes to seek clarification from me regarding whether or not I was aware of emergency exiting plans with respect to the proposed redeveloped Casement Park Stadium. It goes on to say, in your evidence to the committee on the 17th of September 2015, you indicated to members that you were not aware that emergency exiting was an issue of concern. However, in his evidence to the committee on the 28th of January 2016, Mr Dominic Walsh, former chairperson of Sport NI, indicated that at a meeting in mid-2012 he told you of concerns around emergency exiting with respect to the proposed redeveloped Casement Park Stadium and was assured that these were being dealt with. The committee also wishes to seek clarification from you regarding whether or not you were aware of plans around the possibility of purchasing and demolishing houses adjacent to the proposed redeveloped Casement Park Stadium. In your evidence to the committee on the 17th of September, you indicated that you did not recall any such discussions. In his evidence to the committee on the 20th of January, Mr Walsh indicated that this issue was discussed with you at the meeting in 2012 referred to above. It may be helpful if I recall precisely what I was asked and my responses when I gave evidence to the committee in September last. Mr Humphrey asked me whether I had ever discussed the demolition of houses around the proposals for exiting at Casement Park. I responded, not to my recollection, no. He then asked whether there had ever been any discussion with the Minister of safety issues and the issue of properties being purchased in the streets surrounding Casement Park to facilitate greater emergency exiting and egress. I responded, I have no recollection of such a discussion. Mr Humphrey asked me if I had ever discussed it with the Minister's Special Advisor. Again, I replied, I have no recollection of such a discussion, no. If those questions were put to me again today, my responses would be the same. My evidence today will be that Mr Walsh is inaccurate in his recollection as to any meeting with him in which I was involved. But before I respond in detail to Mr Walsh's evidence, I wish to raise 2 points of concern to me. In discussion among the members of this committee following Mr Dominic Walsh's evidence session, Mr Humphrey said that I had clearly misled this committee in terms of the evidence I gave in answering the question to him about the demolition of houses. From this, it would appear that Mr Humphrey concluded that I misled this committee on the basis of Mr Walsh's assertions about a meeting he attended with the Minister and me, and the content of discussion at that meeting. I'm concerned that a member of this committee reached this conclusion without hearing my response to Mr Walsh's evidence. This seems to me to be contrary to fairness and natural justice. Second, I refer to an interview given by the chair of this committee on the BBC radio programme Good Morning Ulster on the 29th of January 2016, the day after Mr Dominic Walsh had given his evidence. The chair said, "We heard very compelling evidence yesterday from the former chair of Sport NI, Dominic Walsh, who was in post from January 2008 to October 2012, and told us that in the summer of 2012, which is more than 3 years ago, there was a discussion in the Minister's office with her Permanent Secretary Rosalie Flanagan and her Special Advisor Jarlath Kearney, and that it was mentioned during that meeting that 4 houses were to be purchased and demolished adjacent to Casement Park in order to provide adequate emergency exiting. Mr McCausland went on to refer to my previous evidence that I had not discussed the demolition of houses and said that it was surprising that the committee had not been told about the meeting or provided with the notes of the meeting. He also described Mr Walsh as a very convincing witness. The inference from these statements is that the chair fully believed Mr Walsh and his evidence as opposed to the evidence which I had previously given, without giving me the opportunity to respond to Mr Walsh's assertions. This also seems to me to be contrary to fairness and natural justice. Turning now to the substantive issues on which I've been asked to give evidence to the committee, I will first address Mr Walsh's assertions about regular meetings during 2012. In his evidence to the committee in January 2016, Mr Walsh told the committee that in the summer of 2012, at a time when the Chief Executive of Sport NI was off ill, he had frequent, regular Friday update meetings with the Minister, her Special Advisor and myself. In terms of the timeline, I can tell the committee that the Chief Executive of Sport NI, Mr Eamon McCartan, was absent on sick leave from mid-May 2012 until he retired. So the period referred to by Mr Walsh must be between mid-May and the 10th of September 2012, when Mr Walsh's term of office as Chair of Sport NI ended. My recollection and the evidence of the Ministers and my diaries during that period show that no such regular Friday update meetings took place. Indeed, the Minister very rarely held any meetings in the department on Fridays as she worked in her constituency. I note that, in addition to his assertion in evidence to this committee about frequent regular Friday meetings with Minister Ní Cullen, Mr Walsh also told the committee that he had fortnightly meetings with Mr Nelson McCausland when he was Minister. Mr Walsh was Chair of Sport NI during all of Mr McCausland's term as Minister of DCAL, some 22 months. I do not recall fortnightly meetings between Mr Walsh and Minister McCausland during my 15 months as Permanent Secretary in DCAL. But perhaps these predated my appointment, or perhaps they were held without officials being present. As I have said, there were no regular Friday meetings as asserted by Mr Walsh, but in order to give the committee a complete picture, I can tell you that there were only 3 occasions in 2012 when the Minister and I had meetings with Mr Walsh. None of these were on Fridays, in fact they were all on Wednesdays, and none occurred after the Chief Executive of Sport NI had gone off ill in mid-May. The first of these was when the Minister and I met Mr Walsh and Mr McCartan, the Chair and Chief Executive of Sport NI, on the 15th of February 2012. Mr Mick Corrie, the Head of Sports in DCAL at the time, was also present. The meeting was held to discuss Sport NI business planning. I have no specific recollection of that meeting, but in any case it is well outside the time frame and had a wider attendance than the meeting referred to by Mr Walsh. The second occasion was when the Minister was meeting the Board of Sport NI on Wednesday the 28th of March 2012. She held a short pre-meeting with Mr Walsh, which I attended. Mr Jarlath Kearney was not in post at that time. He was not appointed as the Minister's Special Advisor until the 2nd of April 2012. The purpose of that pre-meeting was to give Mr Walsh, as Chair of Sport NI, the courtesy of advance notice that the Minister was going to tell the Board that she was considering bringing the stadium programme into the department. The third occasion was when the Minister held a further meeting with the Board of Sport NI on Wednesday the 2nd of May 2012, which again was preceded by a short pre-meeting with Mr Walsh, at which Mr Kearney and I were present. The purpose of that pre-meeting was to give Mr Walsh the courtesy of advance notice that the Minister was going to tell the Board that she had serious concerns about governance in Sport NI. At neither of those meetings on the 28th of March and the 2nd of May 2012 was there any mention or discussion of emergency exiting or the purchase or demolition of houses in relation to the redevelopment of Casement Park. In fact, at the time of the meeting on the 20th of March 2012, Sport NI was in the lead in the delivery of the stadium programme. Responsibility for delivery of the stadium programme transferred from Sport NI to DCAL on the 30th of April, 2 days prior to the meeting on the 2nd of May. So on both of those dates, the Chair of Sport NI would have been in a position of having full knowledge about the programme from Sport NI, and there would have been no reason or logic in his raising a significant detailed question such as this about the programme with either the Minister or myself. We would have expected him to tell rather than ask us about such an issue. Mr Walsh told the committee that I took minutes or contemporaneous notes of the regular Friday meetings and at the specific meeting at which he said emergency exiting and the purchase of houses were discussed. Although there were no regular Friday meetings nor any specific meeting at which these matters were discussed, again for completeness I can tell the committee that I did not take minutes or contemporaneous notes of either of those pre-meetings which were attended by Mr Walsh, the Minister and me. It would have been unnecessary to do so given the courtesy nature of the meeting. When I was working, I had notebooks which I used to record significant points and actions I needed to take, whether at meetings, during phone calls or otherwise. These notebooks were not a part of the official departmental record. They were my aid memoir. If any points or actions needed to be recorded officially, I would have dictated or written them to be typed, or typed them myself, and they would have then been saved on the electronic filing system. When I retired, I put all my notebooks in a box and took them home, where they sat under my stairs awaiting shredding. My inertia in getting round to doing this means that I still have those notebooks and have been able to look at what I wrote on the 20th of March and the 2nd of May 2012. On the 20th of March, I have recorded a discussion where the Minister told Mr Walsh of her serious concerns about delivery of the stadium programme by Sport NI, her thoughts about transferring responsibility for delivery into the department, and Mr Walsh's reactions and responses. There is no mention of emergency exiting at Casement Park or of the purchase of houses. On the 2nd of May, I have recorded some responses from Mr Walsh on some of the governance issues which the Minister was about to raise with the Sport NI board. My memory is that I had sent a list of these to Mr Walsh in advance, so he was already aware of them before he came to the meeting. There is no mention of emergency exiting at Casement Park or of the purchase of houses. Mr Walsh told the committee that at one of these Friday update meetings in 2012, while he was the chair of Sport NI, he raised the issue of emergency exiting at the redeveloped Casement Park, and that I assured him that it was being dealt with through the purchase of housing, specifically the purchase of 4 houses that were on the opposite side to the Andersonstown Road. He thought it was Owen Barra Park. I would like to comment on some of Mr Walsh's assertions about the emergency exiting issue. In his evidence to the committee about when he had first become aware of the potential problem with emergency exiting, Mr Walsh said that emergency exiting issues around Casement Park were highlighted from the very outset in the outline business case and in the summary from Sport NI. Compliance with relevant health and safety legislation was a programme objective for the stadium programme from the start, and the proposals in the OBC were designed to ensure compliance with the Red Guide and aimed to improve standards to comply with the Safety of Sports Grounds NI Order 2006 certification scheme. The OBC stated that the proposals for the GAA were compliant with all relevant legislation. In his evidence to this committee in October last, Mr Edgar Jardine advised the committee that 12 potential risks were identified in the OBC. Emergency exiting was not one of those 12 risks. When the Chief Executive of Sport NI, Mr Eamon McCartan, wrote to the Department in July 2010 with a copy of the final OBC, he stated that all requisite approvals had been given by Sport NI staff. This letter did not refer to emergency exiting. In addition, the minutes of the Sport NI board meetings in 2011 and 2012 and papers provided by Sport NI to the Stadium Sponsor Board meetings while I was in the department made no reference to emergency exiting. The current chair of this committee was Minister for DCAL at the time of the finalisation and approval of the OBC, and the point has been made on a number of occasions that the issue of emergency exiting had not arisen during his time as Minister. So Mr Walsh would appear to have been inaccurate in his assertion that emergency exiting was first raised in the outline business case. There is one other point which I think it is important for me to put on record, lest my failure to do so might suggest that I concur with Mr Walsh's assertion. In his evidence about emergency exiting at Casement Park, Mr Walsh said that Casement was always going to be a challenging site because of the physical footprint. He said that I had raised with him the possibility of a joint statement for soccer and Gaelic at Boucher Road instead of at Windsor Park and Casement Park. He thought that was a good idea, a sensible way forward, but in his words, the conversation just fizzled out. This is factually inaccurate. There were discussions at OBC stage about the potential for a possible joint soccer and rugby stadium at Boucher Road. This option failed in the OBC because it did not meet the criterion of acceptability to those two sports. I did not discuss a joint soccer and Gaelic stadium with Mr Walsh because such an option was not considered. Turning now to Mr Walsh's assertion that at a particular regular Friday meeting in the summer of 2012, he had raised the emergency exiting issue, and I had told him, indeed assured him, that it was being dealt with through the purchase of housing. Setting aside the fact that there were no Friday meetings and no meeting within the time frame and with the attendance asserted by Mr Walsh, it is completely unreasonable to suggest that in the summer of 2012 I knew that there was a problem about emergency exiting at Casement Park, or that I was in a position to give assurance that the issue of emergency exiting was to be addressed through the purchase of 4 houses on the opposite side to the Andersonstown Road. In the summer of 2012, the Casement Park project was at the stage of tendering for a design team. The design team was not appointed until early September 2012. So at that time, the design of the redeveloped Casement Park had not even begun, and the specifics of how exiting or emergency exiting would be designed had certainly not begun. For such a significant proposal to purchase houses to have been discussed, or such a significant decision to have been taken, there would have to have been a full analysis of the financial, legal, technical and other relevant aspects of the proposal. Serious consideration would have been given to the potential public controversy which might have arisen from such a decision. All of this would have involved substantial formal paperwork. There would be a clear paper trail in the department and other relevant bodies. No such documentation was provided to me, no such discussions took place with me, and no such decisions were made by me or notified to me in 2012 or at any time when I was in the department. Therefore, in the summer of 2012, I was not and could not have been in a position to provide the definitive assurance which Mr Walsh claims to have been given by me. In conclusion, Chair, I refer to the discussion in this committee following Mr Walsh's evidence session. You said, if I was at a meeting and someone said we are going to knock down 4 houses, that would stick in my mind. It's not the sort of thing that you forget. Knocking down houses, buying houses, knocking them down is a pretty notable thing, and it's a simple thing. There were all sorts of technical issues we have had from different witnesses. They're quite hard to get your mind round because they're very detailed and technical. But here we're dealing with something that's very simple and which even a layman like myself can understand. We're buying houses, it's 4 of them, and we're going to knock them down. So it's not the sort of thing that would slip out of your mind very easily, which I find remarkable. I can only agree that it would be remarkable if such a discussion had taken place involving me and I did not remember it. In conclusion, finally, referring back to the terms of the letter inviting me to this meeting, my evidence to this committee is that Mr Walsh is inaccurate in his recollection and assertions as to a meeting with him in which I was involved. During my time as Permanent Secretary of DCAL, I was not aware of emergency exiting plans for the redeveloped Casement Park Stadium. I was not aware of plans around the possibility of purchasing and demolishing houses adjacent to the proposed redeveloped Casement Park Stadium. There was no meeting in mid-2012 where Mr Walsh told me of concerns around emergency exiting with respect to the proposed redeveloped Casement Park Stadium, where he was assured that these were being dealt with, and where plans around the possibility of purchasing and demolishing houses adjacent to the proposed redeveloped Casement Park Stadium was discussed.
Thank you very much for the evidence there. First question is from Rosie McCorley.
Thank you very much, Rosalie, for coming back to the committee again today.
Can I just go back on a few points that you said? You referred to the pre-meeting and the courtesy nature of the meeting, and no minutes were taken. Was that standard practice? Were there types of meetings where minutes wouldn't be taken?
Yes, there were a lot of meetings and discussions where formal minutes would not have been taken. Formal minutes would be taken of formal minutes, of formal meetings, sorry. The courtesy pre-meeting was simply a short discussion with the chair of Sport and I before the minister went in to talk to the whole board, just to give him advance notice what she was going to say, give him an opportunity to consider it rather than just hearing it for the first time in the meeting. So.
And then, just for clarity, it was at one of these type meetings that Mr. Walsh claimed that this statement was made about the purchase of houses.
No, Mr. Walsh claims that the statement was made at one of a series of regular Friday update meetings. Those two pre-meetings I mention only because, for completeness, they are the only meetings that I had with, that were with the Minister and Mr. Walsh. And neither of those meetings falls into the time frame when the Chief Executive was off sick, and neither of them was on a Friday. So there's a complete contradiction between what Mr. Walsh said and what I've said and what's actually happened.
Okay, because it is an emergent he said, she said, and what we're having is completely conflicting evidence. But what you're saying is those Friday morning meetings which Mr. Walsh referred to, he referred to the Friday morning regular meetings. And
Friday, not Friday morning, but Friday. Yeah.
Friday regular meetings, and those meetings pretty much didn't actually, not in your recollection, didn't happen.
There's no, I don't recall them. The Minister didn't have meetings normally on Fridays. The Minister's diary and my diary don't show any such meeting.
Okay, and you referred to hearing the chair of the committee saying, or you heard it said that someone on this committee said that you had misled the committee, and the chair completely believed Mr. Walsh. Now, to me, that seems to be certainly at the very least premature, because we're listening to evidence. We have been listening to evidence, and that just suggests that some evidence is going to be believed and some isn't, and minds are made up. Would it have felt like that to you when you heard those comments?
As I've said, I said it in my statement. I was concerned that a member of the committee reached this conclusion that I had clearly misled the committee without hearing my response to Mr. Walsh's evidence, and similarly that the comments that the chair made on Radio Ulster were made without giving me the opportunity to respond to Mr. Walsh's assertions.
Yeah, okay. So just for the record then, you said that you have a completely different account from Mr. Walsh. That's what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Can I just refer to a point, because I haven't heard this point actually before, about 4 houses opposite the stadium on the Andersonstown Road being purchased. Could you just maybe clarify that point again, because I haven't heard that.
At almost the final minute of the Dominic Walsh evidence session, Mr. McCrae asked him, well, maybe I just need to go back a little bit. Mr. McCrae said, to be specific to this inquiry and the emergency exiting issue regarding casement, did you bring it to the Minister's attention? Mr. Walsh said, I asked the question, was it? And the Mr. McCrae then said, did you raise the issue as being serious, a challenge, a risk or whatever? In other words, she cannot have not understood that you thought it was a problem. And Mr. Walsh said, at that meeting, I was assured that it was being taken seriously and that the solution was the purchase of 4 houses that were on the opposite side to the Andersonstown Road. I think that is Owenvarra Park. The only reason I know Owenvarra is that I met a lady outside who told me where she was from. I was assured that not only was everyone aware of the issue, but they had a solution for it.
Okay.
That's a quote from the
Okay,
answer.
no, thank you for that. No, it's actually just a bit unclear as to what exactly that means, but the opposite side to the Andersonstown Road. The Andersonstown Road has two sides, so opposite to what? And I listened at it, sounded to me then opposite to Casement, but opposite to Casement then is the other side of the Andersonstown Road from Owenvara. So, I mean, that's left things quite unclear as to that point, but thank you very much.
The point to me in that was that he was very specific, that I had given him some very specific information.
Yes.
And had given him assurances and had convinced him that this was happening. And that just didn't happen.
Didn't happen. Okay.
Thank you. And before we go to Mr. Humphrey, just for the record, I think I'm correct in saying, we can check answer in due course. Mrs. Flanagan did not use the words that I completely believed. She did say that I had used the words compelling and convincing, not the words completely believed, as it was used by Ms. McCauley. William Humphrey.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you very much for your attendance today. And obviously, I wanted to start by addressing the remarks you made about me at the outset of your statement in terms of fairness and natural justice. I have to say that I didn't draw any firm conclusions about your evidence for Mr. Walsh's without hearing your response. In fact, that's why I was very supportive and voted for you to be brought back to the committee so we could hear your response, and indeed supportive of him being brought back, which we hope to do within the next few days as well. I simply noted, as others have, and identified the contradictions in the evidence. So I wasn't siding with your version of events or indeed Mr. Walsh's, because I and this committee are wanting to get clarity and certainty around the issues. This inquiry is about health and safety, and it's specifically about emergency exiting at a proposed stadium at Casement Park. So that's why Swanning and I supported the Minister, Mr. Walsh, and yourself being brought back. And I think, to be fair, that is in line with the aspects of fairness and natural justice. And so, you know, the contradictions that there are between your evidence and his will equally be revisited when Mr. Walsh is in front of this committee whenever that's confirmed. Can I just say, in terms of the formal minutes, so do you want to respond?
Could I
yes,
respond to that? The discussion of this committee following Mr. Walsh's evidence is not, I don't think, in Hansard, but I was able to listen to it on the Listen Again facility on the committee website. And obviously, I took very seriously what was being said, and I went through it and just wrote down everything that was said. And it's quite long, but the particular comment that I'm referring to here, where you said. We were talking about the Minister, and you said, I think it was May, she was here, and that she only became aware of it after Mr. Scott's evidence. Clearly that's not the case, given the evidence that we've been furnished with this morning. That there was a meeting held in summer of 2012, that the Minister, her advisor, and the then Permanent Secretary were all present, and these issues were discussed. If they're not red flags, blue lights, as opposed to red lights, as they were described earlier on, I think it is important, and I therefore propose that the Minister is brought forward to explain this contradictory evidence and any inconsistency of what she has said and given evidence to this committee, as opposed to the man who was the chair of Sport NI at the time, her advisor as to what he knew, and of course the Permanent Secretary, who clearly misled this committee in terms of the evidence she gave in direct questioning and answering the questions to me about the demolition of houses, to which she replied no. I'm just quoting from what was said, and that was why I was so concerned, and why I wanted to put that on the record today.
That's fine, and I have no difficulty with that, but that's why whenever we have conflict, that actually supports my view of people being brought back here to be re-questioned around issues that clearly are conflicting. We have a permanent secretary and a minister saying one thing, and someone who was the chairman, a public servant who was the chairman of Sport NI, saying another. And this inquiry is into emergency exiting, health and safety at a stadium at which potentially £60 million in public money would be spent, and I think it's important that we get answers to those questions. And that's what we're about in terms of the Minister coming back last week and yourself coming back today, and Mr Walsh coming back the next few days. And I would commend you, because unlike the Minister, you have actually afforded us the respect of actually putting forward questions. And if I might move to questions, Dominic Walsh, when he was here, told this committee, and again this will all be revisited with Mr Walsh, that he was unable to get access to papers. Unlike you, he didn't retain his own papers and notes. He had, I think, told this committee that he gave them to the department. I think we are led to believe they have been destroyed. Now, from the evidence that we have here from Mr Scott and from other people, it is very difficult for us as members of this committee to actually understand or believe that whenever these issues are being discussed at sponsor board, at the safety technical group, at Sport NI board meetings, that these are not being fed through to the minister at her level and at the senior civil service level within the department. Can you understand that? That we have evidence here. We have minutes and correspondence in terms of letters and in writing, in terms of email, and there's so much conflicting around this. And why is it whenever meetings are held with the minister that minutes are not always taken? These are issues of huge. This is
Sorry, I'm not really clear what the question you're asking me.
What I'm saying is there is evidence within the bundle that we have here in this pack that suggests that these issues were discussed: emergency exiting,
Sorry,
demolition.
I'm only here to answer questions really about what Mr Walsh said and about
Yes.
my time in the department and about the specific meeting that he asserts was held and the specific
Yes.
discussions that he asserts.
And what I'm
were made.
asking you is,
I mean, and I've given you as full and as candid an explanation and a statement about what I know and what happened, and I don't think I can comment, or it would be appropriate for me to comment on the wider issue of what was said by other people in other contexts and in other bundles and so on. I'm not in a position to deal with a question like that.
okay, and then let me ask you, in terms of the meetings that you attended with Mr Walsh, with the Minister, were there minutes of those meetings?
As I said, there were 3 meetings in 2012 where the Minister and I were present in the meeting with Mr Walsh. The first of those was also attended by Mr Eamon McCartan and Mr McCarry, and was in February, so it's well outside the meeting described by Mr Walsh. The other 2 were in at the end of March and the beginning of May 2012. They were also outside the meetings described by Mr Walsh, regular Friday meetings. They were on Wednesdays. There were, as I have said, those 2 meetings where Mr Walsh, the Minister, and myself were in the room, as opposed to the full meeting with the Board of Sport NI, which is not what we're talking about. Minutes were not taken of those meetings. They were meetings as such. They were a courtesy pre-meeting for the Minister to tell Mr Walsh what she was going to be saying to the full board, as I've said already, to give him a courtesy of advance notice of that, so that he wasn't just hearing it for the first time when she came into the full meeting. So that type of a meeting, a pre-meeting, wouldn't have minutes. And
would it have notes?
As I told you, I would have a notebook with me and I would jot down just some points. For me, that notebook was just my aid memoir. To have it there, the Chair will recall when he was a Minister, I would have done the same in meetings with him. I would have had a notebook, I would have jotted down things, anything particularly to record any action point that I had to take or anything that I needed to tell somebody or something like that. But they weren't notes of the meeting. They were an aid memoir for reference purposes. So there wouldn't be minutes of a pre-meeting generally.
Well, I think perhaps if we had minutes of those meetings, we may have got the clarity and certainty we need around these issues.
Well, I mean, the point is that those two meetings, and perhaps I have created a complication here by mentioning two meetings that weren't the meetings that Dominic Walsh was talking about, because they weren't on Fridays, they weren't part of a regular series of meetings, and they weren't after the Chief Executive had gone off sick, which he mentioned a number of times in his evidence. But I just wanted to give the committee my full recollection of my engagement in any meeting with the Minister and Dominic Walsh, because Mr. Walsh, as he said, didn't have notes, and he he may have been confusing something or thinking of another meeting. So that's why I wanted to put those two on the record.
Yeah, and I appreciate that, but I think, Chair, there's a basic point. If minutes had been taken, or indeed if the notes that Mr. Walsh rendered to the department have not been destroyed or misled or whatever has happened to them, perhaps we might have had certainty and clarity around some of these issues.
Just for the record, I think his notes maybe went to Sport NI rather than directly
but
into the
still
department.
part of the department.
But it is part of the department, yes, correct.
But the point is that I actually somewhat fortuitously and accidentally have retained my notes. I am well aware that it's difficult to prove a negative, that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The fact that my notes don't mention emergency exiting, you could say to me, doesn't mean that it wasn't mentioned, but I would say to you that if something of that nature had been said in a pre-meeting or in any meeting, I would at least have written a couple of words down to that effect in my notebook. I'm absolutely certain that those discussions did not take place at either of those two pre-meetings.
And I get the veracity in which you're making your point. I'm simply just going to say in conclusion that this is an inquiry into the issue of emergency exiting, which is hugely important. It's a significant investment by, I think, of around £60 million by government. And I find it incredible, the people out there will find it incredible, that when meetings like this are held around this issue, that there are no notes officially taken or minutes kept. I find that just incredible. Thank you.
But the point about these two meetings is they weren't meetings about these issues. They were meetings about other issues.
They may have been talks about talks, but they were meetings with the Permanent Secretary, the Minister and the Head of Sport NI. I'll make the point and leave it.
Okay, but we've explored that. We'll take David Hildish.
Thanks, Chair, and you're very welcome again this morning, Rosalie, to come along before us. And I think we had established at your previous visit that you had a fair understanding of what the processes were and what the requirements were, and hence we had looked at that letter that you issued in relation to Windsor and how it had come along and overcome challenges and whatnot, and turned into a more successful build. Just going on the demolition of the house situation again. Obviously, you were in situ until April 13, isn't that right? Around that time. And then shortly after that, some drawings appeared from design teams and whatnot in relation to what appeared to be overcoming issues. And it did show the demolition of housing. So it was in the ether somewhere. Somebody was talking about it somewhere. Are you somewhat surprised as Permanent Secretary you didn't know then at April 13 before you left that there was these suggestions?
I can just say that I wasn't aware of it. The process, as I think I described in detail at my last appearance here, was what it was, and I wasn't aware of those. I couldn't answer your question. Was I surprised? I mean, you'd have to have the whole context of the process.
Yeah. No, it's just that for us.
And I mean, I do want to go back to the fact that I'm really here to talk about Dominic Walsh's evidence, and I just wanted.
I think he mentioned demolition of housing, and that's why I raised demolition of housing. So I am on the right.
Actually, when I read Hansard, Dominic Walsh didn't actually mention demolition of housing. He mentioned purchase of housing a number of times. The word demolition was only mentioned by some members of this committee, and that evidence. Just to be clear, I mean, I have studied what Dominic Walsh said, and
The plans that emerged afterwards, the purchased houses were going to be demolished, let's put it like that, I think. There was an email in April 13, just before I think you retired from office, from I think it was Carl Sullern to Paul Scott in relation to trying to get some information on exiting to facilitate a meeting with the Minister where this would potentially be raised. So again, the matter's being raised at that level, and again, I know you're top of the pile and this is maybe something going on down below, but you're saying that again you wouldn't have known anything of Mr. Sutherland's inquiry or Sutherland's inquiry?
I mean, I'll get boring. I can only repeat that I didn't know anything about this while I was in the department.
Okay, no problem. And just to establish as well, in your previous visit, that I think Mr. Colin Watson had come along to the committee to, as a director, an acting grade 5, as you recall, sports branch, which had the stadium programme as one element of it, and he attended here in 2012-13. In the food chain of command or whatever, who would have been briefing Mr. Watson to come to the committee to tell us about the stadium developments at that stage? What was the sort of chain?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't. I don't think it's relevant to what Dominic Walsh has said, but the people in the stadium programme team, I think it was called, in the department, and Mr. Watson would have worked closely together.
That's no problem. Just to say that was your Mr. Walsh's time too. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, if we could raise just a couple of points here, Self. How often would you have met with Dominic Walsh on your own, or with whether or not the Minister was there? Just how often would there have been engagement or interaction? Is that frequent, or how frequent?
It wouldn't have been very frequent, no. I think I only met him on his own 3 times in 2012.
Or in meetings with others, other officials, or whatever?
Not very often, would be the answer.
That be sort of once a month or once every 2 months, or?
Well, in 2012, are you talking about in 2012 or in general?
Yes.
I mean, I recall I had a one-to-one meeting with him, which was his appraisal as chair in January, and I then had not really a meeting, but I met him. I met him and had a discussion with him at his request, because his first term was coming to an end, and he was deciding whether to go for a second term, and he had in the end decided not to go for a second term. And I had another meeting when he came to see me at his request, just after the meeting on the 28th of March, where the Minister had discussed with the board taking the stadium programme into the department and away from Sport NI, and he came to see me just to brief me on the reaction from the board members and from the Chief Executive and from the staff to that decision by the Minister. And apart from that, I don't recall any other meetings. I did attend one board meeting in Sport NI in the summer of 2012, but that would have been with the whole board.
Okay.
And then he left on the 10th of September.
Within the department, the electronic diary, were you able to check that for meetings with him or whoever before coming here?
Yes.
So the diary for that period for all meetings is still on the system for you, from your time?
I don't exactly know because I'm not there, but I asked the question, could they tell me anything at the meetings that I had with Dominic Walsh, and those were the
So we're relying there, just to be clear on that point then, you haven't actually seen the diary. It's only officials in the department that have seen this diary since, since the request was made for information.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't have seen it. I wouldn't be in the department.
No, I thought-
What is the information that was given to me confirmed my own recollection of when I, my engagement with Dominic Walsh. That I think it's worth saying that period in around the middle of 2012 was a difficult one because of the issues around the stadium programme being brought into department and all of those issues. So I have quite a good recollection of what happened then. I mean, a lot of other things going on with obviously the Olympics and the Paralympics and
Indeed.
preparation for the World Peace and Fire Games and City of Culture and lots of things. So, but that was probably one of the difficult issues that I was dealing with.
But the core point, I suppose, there is that the full diary of the permanent secretary from that period is still there on the system in the department.
I think you would have to ask the department that. I only know what I know, which is that I asked them, could they tell me, could they confirm for me what I recalled as being the times that I met? But I'm not sure. I mean, that's not really relevant to what Dominic Walsh said and his evidence, which I'm being asked to answer today.
But when meetings took place with Sir Walsh, where would they have taken place normally?
With the minister, they would have taken place in the minister's room or
first,
the boardroom. Yeah.
Down in Causeway.
In Causeway, yeah.
Stage, yeah. And if you were meeting Mr. Walsh,
sorry, I know I'm speaking here under affirmation, so I don't want to be saying something that's not true. I mean, sometimes the ministry would have had meetings in Parliament buildings on Mondays and Tuesdays.
And if you were meeting him separately from that, if you were just meeting Mr. Walsh in Causeway.
In Causeway, yeah. Well, actually, the time that I mentioned, the occasion when he asked to talk to me about us thinking about going for second term, I actually went to a local cafe and had a cup of coffee with him there. So that was just for completeness again, for the record. But my meetings with him would have been in Causeway. Obviously, when I went to the Sport NI board meeting, that was in the House of Sport.
But, yeah.
So for meetings, that would have been the norm. Yeah.
Well, I think we've asked for information about diaries, what's been retained in terms of diaries and so on. We've asked about that. There's a point here which, and it really gets to the heart of the whole thing. It's something that has been in our minds, I think, with a lot of the folk that we've been receiving evidence from. There was a sort of architecture or structure there with a safety technical group, and you had Noel Malloy and permanent secretary and minister and all sorts of folk. And there was if I can put my hand on it, maybe can't. There was a diagram given to us at one time of, if I can find there, the Decal Stadium Programme governance structure, which had at the top the stadium sponsor board chaired by the minister, then in below that the stadium programme with the senior responsible officer in charge there, and then the stadium programme managed by the director, and then a sort of parallel system for each of the three sports going down to the safety technical groups. At that period in the summer of 2012, and we're talking about a period there where it was brought into the department, I think, at the start of 2012.
On the 30th of April 2012.
30th of April. And even McCartney actually left then within a matter of days. Oh no, so he went off sick shortly after that.
He went off sick in the middle of May. I'm not sure the exact date, but it was around the 10th or 11th of May that I was notified of it, so I don't know when he went off.
So over that period, sort of April to September, October, when Dominic Walsh retired, that structure was in place. You have the Stadium Sponsor Board, then the Stadium Programme, SRO, What does that actually mean, stadium programme and SRO? Was there a stadium programme board, or does that mean the stadium programme was managed by in some way by the senior responsible officer?
I'm sorry, you're asking me questions now which I haven't really given a lot of thought to because I was focusing on these issues. Could you maybe just repeat the question? It's not again. I mean, I have to say, Chair, I don't think it's particularly relevant to Dominic Walsh's evidence.
If you don't wish to answer it, that's fine. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
It's just an opportunity to get it clear in our own minds, because we were given a diagram.
Yeah.
If you pass it round there, well, members will have it in their pack somewhere, but I've only got around a few of them all, because I couldn't quite. It does become very difficult for us to. I'm sure you'll appreciate it, because it is such a complicated issue. And I think it goes back to the point then, you see, that would you not have expected to, you were with us before and you said that you weren't aware of issues about emergency exiting. That's the core of this. And David Hill has touched on it there. Are you not surprised that it wasn't raised with you?
I don't have the Hansard of what I said before with me, but I think that I don't think it's a question of sitting here in 2016 trying to speculate what I would or wouldn't have been surprised about in 2012. The process structures, the systems were there, and different people had different responsibilities, and as far as I was concerned, the governance structure was in place and it was followed. And I mean, in terms of governance structure, I can't be specific, but there were a number of changes of governance structure as the programme developed, you know, from its early days in Sport NI, and then a new structure just, I think, shortly before the stadium programme was brought into the department, and then when it came into the department, we had to set up a new structure, and then when we had gateway reviews, we would have maybe revised those structures, but I'm really not in a position to give you definitive answers, and I'm very cautious because I am under affirmation, and I've had legal advice, and I just want to be cautious of what I say and what you're asking me.
Absolutely. It was Mr. Dunn, who's not with us at the moment, had posed the question, when did you first become aware of the emergency exiting issue at Casement? And your answer was, I was not aware of it when I was Permanent Secretary.
Mm-hmm. And I think in terms of what we're talking about here, that's the point. Whether I might have been aware of it, I should have been aware of it, I could have been aware of it, is really not the point. For me here today, my position is I was not aware of it.
Mr. Hilditch referred, see this where it gets difficult, he referred there to a diagram that we were given by Sport NI, which was has a date on it. Now, the date is actually outside your period. It's about a month after you had left the department, and it shows on one side what appeared to me to be two houses being demolished to make way for purchased and demolished to make way for exiting, and then on the other side it appears to be part of a house or part of two houses. So probably four houses altogether, two on each side affected. And I think that's what Mr. Hilditch was referring to, this thing that at that time, over that summer, within the system somewhere, there was discussion about the demolition of properties, purchase and demolition of properties. Now, it's not the same point in time exactly as Mr. Walsh, because he had left in the autumn of 2012. You were saying at that stage, when you were with us, that you never...
If somebody has a phone that's functioning, can they just turn that to airplane, because it's going to buzz all over the system here. So
I was not aware of emergency exiting issue, and yet it was being put on bits of paper or plans by Populous and the GAA on the 10th, reads to me here, it's very small print, 10th of May 13, I think you had left in April. Nobody ever mentioned any of those things to you?
No.
Who should, within the structure, who should have mentioned it to you? Who was the person who was meant to keep you appraised of all that's going on?
I mean, there's an assumption in what you're asking me that somebody should have mentioned it to me, and I at this distance of time and not being au fait with everything, I can't really answer that. And as I've said already, I don't think it's relevant to what Dominic Walsh has asserted here that's contradictory to what I'm saying.
Yeah. Well, could I just ask finally the question? What, on this diagram, the person on the next rung down in the ladder or in the structure was the Stadium Programme Director, and that was Noel Malloy. What did he tell you, or not? Or how did he keep you informed of all these things?
All what things?
Issues around the stadium programme. If somebody's the senior responsible officer, the buck stops there in a sense. There is a responsibility that goes with being this. I think SRO does mean senior responsible officer. If there's a responsibility there, who keeps the person who's the senior responsible officer informed?
I don't think I have really anything to add to what I said when these questions were put to me in September, Chair.
Not sure if that.
And I think such a question would have to be contextualised, and as I say, it's not relevant to what I'm here today to respond to.
Well, we'll pursue that on other ways. Rohashin?
Chair, thank you, Rosalie. But just to get this back to where we should be at in this is the difference of opinion between yourselves and Dominic Walsh, whose evidence has been described in other fora as compelling and convincing. There was 3 meetings with yourself, the Minister and Dominic Walsh. 1 in March and 2 in May.
1 in February, 1 in March, and 1 in May.
Sorry, 1 in February, 1 in March, 1 in May. At the May meeting, the 3rd May meeting, Jarlath Kearney was also present.
Yes.
He was not present at the February or March meetings.
I wasn't in the department then.
Was there anybody else present at any of those other 2 meetings,
Well, as I
informal
said,
or otherwise?
the February meeting, I understand, was attended also by Eamon McCartan, the Chief Executive of Sport NI, and Mick Curry, who was the head of sport in DCAL at the time. And at the 28th of March meeting, it was just, in that pre-meeting, it was just Mr Walsh, the Minister, and myself. And on the 2nd of May, Jarlath Kearney was also in the room.
Okay. And what was discussed at that meeting? What do you remember?
Which one?
The May meeting.
The May meeting was where the Minister was just having a courtesy pre-meeting with Mr Walsh before she told the board about her governance concerns, and I had, as I recall, sent Mr Walsh a note earlier in the day telling him what the list of governance concerns were, and there was some discussion about some of those at the pre-meeting.
So as far as
it wasn't about the stadium.
No, okay. So as far as you were concerned, there wasn't regular meetings as such?
Absolutely not, no.
There was no July meeting?
No.
And there were no Friday meetings?
No.
You're aware of? Okay. I think you have clarified the 4 houses and the opposite. Like Rosie, I was unsure what that meant actually. What constitutes?
Well, I'm not sure what it meant, but I was simply quoting from what Mr Walsh had said.
You've clarified that. Nope. That's pretty clear, Rosie. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Nobody else? Any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much indeed. That will feed into our discussions and deliberations. And we appreciate your coming and answering the questions.
Thank you very much.
Don't worry about the annulment thing. Could we, do we take that today, leave that and move on to the next item? We've got the two other items. We've got the Arts Council and we also have the statutory rule. Okay. If we go to, it's not quite the right order, but number 5 on my agenda here, statutory rules. The court rules privileged access NI 2016. Now, if you go to, well, that's. This is page 87, the Clerk's memo. The statutory rule is at page 89. There's an explanatory memorandum at page 98 and decal correspondence regarding privileged access to information at page 102. The statutory rule sets out a voluntary process for individuals to access court papers other than using freedom of information requests. The rule is subject to negative resolution and can be annulled within 30 calendar days or 10 sitting days, whichever is longer. As 4 of the sitting days will have elapsed before the end of the mandate, the remaining 6 will be in the new mandate. Now, I have to say, I had a wee bit of concern here in terms of process. Sorry, just to get this. There was a consultation carried out on this.
Yes, Chair.
But
it was unusual.
Could you maybe talk us through that?
Well, Chair, there was when this was first brought to the committee, it was via the issue of a consultation being undertaken and the cost of a consultation being undertaken. As members know, statutory rules are secondary legislation that flows from primary legislation. Most primary legislation will have an aspect of it that allows for regulations and so on to be made. With this one, there was a consultation process as well. So the committee's understanding was that consultation would be done then at what's called an SL1, which is background to what the SR actually does, would be prepared, would come to committee, and then obviously you would have the statutory rule itself, and the explanatory and financial memorandum with that. The last understanding we had was that wasn't to be laid until this week, but it actually got laid on Friday, the 4th. Part of the problem with that was because it was early, there was no number, so we've only just got the number of the stat rule. So effectively now processes can be undertaken on it because we have a number that can go into the record and so on. But we didn't expect it to be quite so fast, and we've got all the information in one go, and there's a lot of it there for members to look at. The consultation précis is in the EFM, is in the explanatory and financial memorandum. So it's a lot of information to process, Chair, in a fairly short space of time.
So what we have is a situation where a consultation took place. We, as a committee, haven't seen the results of that consultation. It's not on their website.
It's a précis. We have a précis in the EFM. Chair, when we...
Sorry, what can we just do it for the sake of record here? The précis amounts to...
It's not very long.
Page
I think there were 11.
101.
101.
There were, I think, 11 responses, Chair.
Yeah.
It doesn't go into a huge amount
There
of
were 11 responses. Let's just go for a moment to page 101 then to see what it actually...
What I have to say also, Chair, is we did ask department specifically for a written briefing for this because we wanted information on paper. This was to give members some ability to see what was going on before then, potentially, if members want to get a briefing on it. But as I say, in the intervening point, the statutory rule has now been laid.
Now, it says here, public consultation on the proposed rules took place during January and February 2016. 11 responses were received from individuals and a range of organisations, including a number from the legal and voluntary sectors. The Department hosted a number of stakeholder engagement events organised in partnership with the Commission for Victims and Survivors in the Law Society. Focused engagement took place with organisations representing victims and survivors in Belfast, Londonderry and Portadown. The events provided an opportunity for the Department to present the draft rules and to answer any questions. Participants were encouraged to submit a written response, and we now know there were 11 responses. The key themes emerging from the consultation relate to the materials covered by the draft rules, the provisions for making the rules, and in relation to the process of the process to other routes to seek such information. Now, we're actually being presented with a fait accompli in that the consultation has taken place, the Department has that material, it's not on their departmental website, we haven't seen it, and this committee is effectively being marginalised by the Department. It was to happen this week. Instead, it was rushed for some reason or other at the end of last week, without this committee having been given its proper place. And I'm sure similar members at least will feel concerned that the democratic process is once again being subverted by the way in which this has been done, and this committee has been treated with disrespect and ignored by the Department, in that it's a fait accompli. Does any member wish to comment on that? Mr. Creagh, yes, please.
Yes, like yourself, Chair, I do have some concern at the apparent indecent haste of this. I was expecting to hear the results of that consultation, to consider them in due course. But we have this being rushed through, and it's under very old legislation, the 1923 Act. I don't know how many other regulations were developed from that in recent times. But it seems to me that it's being pushed. There's not proper time to consult, and I would request that we obtain legal or procedural advice on this particular issue as to what the committee or indeed individual MLAs can do to block this statutory rule until there's adequate scrutiny of what is proposed by all the relevant bodies. So in fact that we are covered. Chair, at the moment I feel very vulnerable on this particular point.
Certainly we are left vulnerable in that we're not able to carry out our duty.
No. So say there are a prayer of annulment against it, which I'll be quite happy to support as well. I just think that we've got to make sure that this just isn't steamrollered through, fait accompli, at this particular time, when you can't meet the normal rules for the period of time before it can be annulled.
I suspect that our concerns will be shared by others, because I can't think of any reason myself why it would be rushed through in this way.
Can we ask for the consultation results?
Sure, absolutely. We can ask the Department if they'll provide those consultation results. We can do that immediately. Off the top of my head, I don't know why they wouldn't be able to share them, but there may be some issues around anonymity or something like that. I don't know. I honestly don't. I'm talking off the top of my head there. I don't honestly, but we can certainly ask, Chair. And if members also then want to bring this back for Thursday so that we can do a formal process.
Well, Chair, can we ask those questions that I've put? So in fact that's running parallel, so in fact that we can be assured that we are doing all this proper to safeguard the situation.
Sure, if I just remind members of the process, so that the stat rule was laid on Friday, and the way that the process works is there's a period of either 30 days or 10 sittings before you pass out of the period where it can be prayed against with a prayer of annulment because it's negative resolution. The commencement on the stat rule itself, which we now have because it's got dates on it now, previously it didn't have dates on it, is the 30th of March. So what that actually means is the stat rule will be operational throughout the PERDA period.
Yeah, that's exactly, and that's, I believe,
When you
very
get into the new
unhealthy.
mandate, it's the complexity of, unlike other things, a stat rule can fall across mandates.
It might be helpful if we. I brought this in and started, and we have to be out of here by.
We absolutely must be out of here by 12:15. Absolutely must be. There's other committees
Now,
coming in.
we'll probably need to take another few minutes on this one, but I'm keen. Maybe if we brought in the arts folk, give them, take half an hour to go through the key issue with them, and then just return to this for 5 minutes at the end. Would that be agreeable? Okay. We'll bring the arts folk in, and we'll return to that at the end. I didn't want us to be left at the end whereby we were suddenly rushed with.
Food and drink to worry about. Food.
Morning.
Good morning indeed. And
Just we're still
I'm not in any way being disrespectful to Leslie Cree, and I wouldn't be.
Good job, Beth. I'm pleased to hear that, but I will return to that issue, yeah.
But
But I need to step out for a couple of minutes. If the senior statesman on the committee, Mr. Cree, members will agree with him to take the chair for a couple of minutes.
That's a proposed chair. Is there a
Proposed.
seconder for that proposal?
Means you're the oldest. That's
Is that it?
Is there a
That's good.
seconder for that proposal? Seconder, and the members are content?
our members content for him. Yeah. Okay.
Mr. Cree,
It'll be
Mr. Cree,
long, because I need to about two.
Yeah.
just flagging up to members, that leaves us with 4 members. So at that point, we can't make decisions, but we can still continue with the formal meeting.
Yes, well, let's do just that then. You're very welcome, folks, again. And yes, this is very formal here. I've actually got your name, but I can see them from here anyway.
See, I can't.
So,
my eyesight's not
Rushing, you're very welcome, Noreen, Anne and Damien. So we're pleased to have you here this morning, just this morning. And if you have a presentation, perhaps we just proceed with that.
I'm conscious that the business of the committee has overrun, and you've had a busy morning, so I'm not going to make any extended statement. You asked us to come and talk about our perspective in terms of the implications of the for the Arts Council as it transfers to a new department for the communities, and I've already responded to the committee with some kind of preliminary thoughts. And indeed, we've had the opportunity to send to the committee our advocacy document, which outlines what we believe the value and the impact of the arts is across a wide areas of government activity. And I think that has found resonance with your own inquiry into the inclusion of working class communities in the arts. So I think that is just a sort of a general statement, and we're very keen that the areas that the committee has outlined in its recommendations, and indeed our own intelligence in that regard, find echo in a forthcoming programme for government, which will be led, of course, by the new minister in the Department for Communities. So I just want to say that as a very kind of brief observation. Clearly, one of our concerns is that because we are such a small organisation, we probably now, I think, only have about 44, 45 FTEs, full-time equivalent members of staff. And we'll be moving into a department that I think has approximately 6,000 civil servants. So you can see, trying to get some visibility for our work, I think, is going to be one of the challenges. That said, we have hitherto enjoyed a good working relationship with our parent department, and we look forward to building the kind of relationship that we've had with GCAL in the Department for Communities. We welcome the fact that now there is greater clarity around the range of the transfer of functions from other departments, which are very wide-ranging, I think, moving into the Department for Communities. There are particular things that we have experience of working with some of those agencies and departments in various kind of partnership programs that we've developed. Housing Executive, I've referenced the Re-Imaging Communities programme. More recently, and we have lots of examples if the committee so wishes to hear about them, but more recently we have developed what we call a local government challenge fund, which I don't know that we've talked to the committee about before. And essentially, we have set aside a pot of lottery money, which has been approved, obviously, by the board of the council. And it's set in the context of the development of community plans that each of the new local councils are working on. And we believe that arts and culture have an important role to play within the context of the new community planning powers that have been conferred. And in order to incentivise the prominence of arts and culture within those plans, we've set aside a pot of money which essentially says to the local authorities, we know that you are funding arts activities and arts organisations in your council area, some more than others. We'd like you to do a little audit, tell us what it is you currently fund, and we will fund you up to £150,000 if you will match that. So we wanted to try and anchor as best we could local provision right across Northern Ireland for the arts, as I said, in that wider strategic context of community plans. And we've spoken to all of the local councils, and some of them have actually managed to get extra money in their rates, which was set, as you know, struck in February, and others are still looking at how they may well align other programmes additionally to match our funding. So we're working very closely with local authorities, and I hope that finds echo with some of the issues that the committee raised in its own report in terms of rural access, for example. We're very conscious that when there are budgetary pressures, often it is the local community-based arts organisations that can get squeezed. So it was an effort to obviate that. Now, with the Department for Communities, the DOE transfer of functions will go into there, and what we're hoping is that because local authorities will match fund what the Arts Council has put on the table, we would very much like the support of this committee and indeed the department in the future to triangulate that with an equivalent pot of money. We put 1.5 million on the table, and we're asking everybody else to try and match that so that we can begin to aggregate opportunities on a more extended basis for people living beyond Belfast and Derry, Londonderry. So I'll leave my remarks at that.
Thank you very much, Oisin. No doubt you'll be prepared for a few questions.
Indeed.
Cathal.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Roisin. Roisin, let's say key to all of this, I suppose, as a new start as such for the Arts Council and its engagement. You mentioned that there the housing. Could you expand on that
Just some of the programmes that we run, and the illustration was through the Imaging Communities programme. We would work with partners, one of whom, for example, would be the housing executive in that programme, and they will be transferred, I understand, into the new Department for Communities. So what I'm essentially saying is that we have a track record already of working in partnership with some of the organisations who will be brigaded within the new department. But we do see further opportunities, and the reason I was profiling the Local Government Challenge Fund is we've always worked with local government, but hopefully that will be made easier when they are the policy function is transferred into the new Department for Communities.
Yeah, and local government has always been very critical to the delivery of arts on the ground, and of course some have done it rather better than others. And I know that I sat on it for some time, and I'm very critical of it. It was the Forum for Local Government and the Arts, and I think it has probably run into the sand. Is there any opportunity there to replace that with something maybe with a bit more teeth?
Well, when we were devising our current programme, we held a symposium, a conference essentially, at which all the local authorities were present, and we spoke to them about the kind of structure that they wanted in order to ensure that there was meaningful engagement with us as a body, one of whose functions is to advise local councils on the arts. And I think they all very much welcomed the prospect of this challenge fund, because that actually gives us a structured mechanism for ongoing engagement. And we will, when we have rolled, when we've secured the agreement of all the local authorities in terms of how they're going to go about matching this, speak to them in terms of how we might have a more formal structure in order to deal with some of the issues that they're facing in terms of the arts. Now, we haven't come to any definitive conclusion on what that might look like, but we are very mindful of the former FLGA and of the fact that it did run into the ground. So I think we need to really think about what works best for all parties concerned.
And just for the housing executive is one example of ones coming into the new communities, Department of Communities. What other ones are there that might have some scope to work with?
The housing executive, obviously within our own department, most but not all of the arm's length bodies will be transferring. But some of the OFM, DFM functions and programmes will also be moving in terms of their responsibility. So, for example, the Community Relations Unit, TBUC as a funded programme will be going, the Social Investment Fund team. So the whole area of disability and poverty, gender and sexual orientation, those functions are all being transferred out of OFM, DFM. The Charities Commission will be there, and so on. But urban regeneration, which is a core function of DSD, will remain, and we will be able to work, continue to work alongside local communities in terms of the role of arts and culture in helping regenerate those communities. So there's a wide range of transfer of both the functions and some bodies into the new department.
Okay, thanks very much.
Okay. William?
Oh, right. Good morning, and thank you very much for your presentation. Yes, I very much agree. I mean, as the person who proposed that the committee do the piece of work around the attachment of working class communities from the arts, I very much agree with what you said, and I was pleased and delighted that there was all party support of that issue when it came to the floor of the House, and be encouraged by what the Minister said, and she had her full support, and do hope that in the new executive post-election that we'll have the support of all the ministers around the executive. But having said that, you mentioned the triumph for coming together with councils and declare an interest, I think, if you still have to, as a former member of Belfast City Council, because I'm going to sing their praises. Belfast obviously has very much stepped up to the plate in the past in terms of the amount of money that is made available for the arts and the development of the arts and so on, both in terms of programming, employing people, excuse me, and capital infrastructural investment. That hasn't always been the case whenever we had 26 councils. In fact, some of those councils really should be embarrassed at the amount of money that they didn't put into the arts. There is often pressure put on Stormont as the regional government for the money that it's contributing, but some of those rural councils didn't step up to the plate. Can I ask you, as Chief Executive and senior officials in the Arts Council in Northern Ireland, in the new 11 councils, are they stepping up to the mark?
I think it's fair to say variously they are, and we have been pleasantly surprised. The individual detail we're still negotiating, but some councils that up until now have been weak, relatively weak, have realised that within the functions and how they've brigaded them within their local council authority areas, recognise that the contribution of the arts to, for example, tourism, the Causeway Coast, I think there has been, in some instances, a greater appreciation of the potential impact that the arts will bring. Now, it is going to be a journey over the next 3 to 5 years, but as I said, we've been very pleasantly surprised.
In fear of having offended...
Notwithstanding Belfast is right,
still leading the way.
It's still leading the way.
In fear of offending my good friend and colleague from East Antrim, I wasn't talking about Carrickfergus.
No one does.
In terms of going forward, we always have a problem in Northern Ireland, and I know that in other countries, particularly America, there is a great benevolence from the private sector and the paying patrons or general public, whatever you want to call it. One example is I've been to the beautiful Symphony Hall in Nashville. There's so much money came from, the private sector and patrons who would be involved in the arts, or just attend, supplemented funding from the city government. Are we making any progress there? I know we're in difficult economic times, so that is difficult. Do you think, are there any signs of that improving?
Well, I heard on the radio this morning, as I'm sure we all did, that Randox are now going to support the Grand National and a company, a major company from Northern Ireland. And whilst I'm sure that's very welcome for the Grand National, I was disappointed to hear that it wasn't for some arts and cultural purpose. And I think, you're right in your observations. Are we making progress? Well, I think tiny progress has been made. If you hear, and I'm sure the committee has heard often from arts and business, they have been increasingly successful in getting more businesses to join and to subscribe to their work and to become members. And so that's encouraging. On our part, we have we have supported arts and business to develop further programmes to help the arts sector expand their capabilities in terms of both audience development, but in raising other sources of funds. And that's been a programme that is rolling out currently and will roll out into the next year, because we're all acutely conscious not only of the difficult times that the private sector faces, but indeed in a contracting budget for the arts, they have to work all that bit harder. So it's a very hard one to crack, I think.
Okay. And just finally, Chair, if I may, in terms of the art collection that the state owns, much of it is hidden and bolted and behind closed doors that no one ever sees. Can we do any more, to ensure that that goes on display? And I know that we don't have a gallery in this city and whatever, but can we do any more that this fantastic collection of art? Recently the committee held its meeting in Havelock House, Ulster Television, Ulster Television, and beautiful collection of art there, as do the BBC, and of course they're on display. In relation to much of the stuff that we have, within government, can we do more to get it on public display, whether that's in libraries, hospitals, wherever it might be? Town halls, city halls?
Committee would probably be aware that the Arts Council has a long track record in both collecting and lending works, and obviously works lent with all of the best conditions attaching to that, which of course there has to be when they're purchased with public money, of course, and some of them very valuable. It's fraught with risk, and we certainly have experienced that risk over the years. But I think there absolutely is more that can be done. And I know that recently National Museums Northern Ireland have, I don't know if they've recruited a post yet, but they certainly have advertised for a curator with the specific job of extending the outreach and the loan offer, particularly around the very substantial collection that the Arts Council gifted to National Museums, because our case when we were gifting was we wanted more relaxed conditions around that, because this had always been, if I could use the phrase, a working collection, in that it was very much in the public domain. And in terms of our criteria for gifting, we've assessed that as part of the criteria, how respective museums might be able to make that work in particular more accessible to the public. So we'll be engaging closely to see how those plans roll out. In terms of our own collection, which is now much smaller but still very important, we do make that available for loan and for exhibition, and we do organise exhibitions, and those tend to tour local authority areas, and we would absolutely we want to continue that programme and indeed to do more. So again, notwithstanding the risks, I think there are ways that we could make work more accessible.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chairman.
Leslie?
Just very quickly, William's covered some of the points that I was interested in, but no, it's fine. You do mention, Roisin, about local government and how, in fact, I don't ask you to name and shame, but some are better, more advanced than others. Can you tell me how many are advanced? I'll just leave it at that, and how many are still in the progress of wishing to become advanced?
Well, I mean,
There only are 11.
There only are 11, that's right. I think in fairness to them all, we are in negotiations, but very positively I wanted to say, for example, the new Newry, Mourne and Down District Council area, just by way of illustration, has advised us that they managed to secure an extra £200,000 in their estimates in order to run a series of arts and cultural events and activities, a programme basically, and that is over and above that which they're currently spending in terms of provision locally, and that therefore they're well able to meet our requirement of match funding. Now I think that's quite a significant achievement, and I think we're very encouraged by that. Others are at different stages.
Is that the only one you're saying then?
No, it's not. I mean, Mid-Ulster, again, as you know, with its plans to open up the Seamus Heaney Centre in the course of I think September, I think they're hoping to open that, again, have advanced plans to, in terms of their own estimates around extra spend on arts and culture. And again, we're in discussion with all of them, because what we're asking them is, please do your audit. We know that money goes up and down year on year and some groups fall in and out, but broadly speaking, what are you currently spending? Then secondly, give us your planned programme, which is additional to that which is currently being supported. And let's look at that and negotiate around what we think is appropriate. However, what we are saying to them is we're not going to give you a pot of money for you to give out in small grants to groups, because we think that is less than strategic. So it is very much a dialogue, but I have to say, really genuinely encouraged by it.
Good. Thank you.
Chairman, could I just add, just on another positive note, that the community planning process, again, is at various stages across the mostly the 10 outside Belfast local authority areas, and again we've been very heartened by the certainly the inclusion of arts and culture as a really strong strand, particularly in Derry Strabane in terms of the community planning to date, and others are very much picking up on that theme in terms of how the arts can contribute to health and well-being, young people, and various other themes, and they're coming to us increasingly to look at how they can anchor arts and culture more in the community planning process. So I think that's very heartening.
Yeah, thank you.
Rosie McCorley.
Carly, thanks very much for your presentation and coming to committee. Just a small question, because people have covered most of the stuff, and I'm sorry for missing the beginning of your presentation. But in terms of the new change in departments, what do you feel it will mean for you? Do you feel it will have disadvantages, or would you see mostly advantages? Just trying to think, are there things that could be flagged up that might be sort of ironed out?
Well, I think in the letter to the committee I said I think communication is going to be the key to all of this, and in any move, in any transition, even if you don't have a great deal to communicate, the fact that you're saying there may not be a lot to say, but you still have an open line of dialogue. So I know the department, our own department brought us together, we did the prospectus, but what I would like to see is, as we move into the new department, is that conversation being actively picked up, because I do think it is very hard for a small organisation to go into a large department and with the risk of being swallowed up. Yeah. I think that yes, that is a challenge, but I also think there is an opportunity. Now, obviously it's going to depend a lot on the Minister. Mm-hmm. It's going to depend a lot on what the new strategy for arts and or culture may look like. between now and May or beyond May, and perhaps with a new minister. So all of those are significant unknowns for us. At present, we don't know what our budget is even for the current year. So we are sitting, having made some recommendations at board level, without the ability to advise our arts organisations of what it is they'll be getting. So, you know, we're conscious that the budgetary process that has been set in train, and I know we will, I'm sure, find out before the end of March, may well alter with subsequent monitoring rounds or budgetary adjustments in light of a new executive being formed after the election. So I think all of those are uncertainties and challenges and potential risks for a small body with a tiny budget moving into a very large department. I think we would be foolish not to at least have thought that.
Okay, thank you. Just to ask a point about financial matter. There was a grant given to the publication of a graphic novel by O'Brien Press in Dublin around the life of Bobby Sands, and it was suggested or asked recently by a blogger in regard to that. Is there anything that would preclude or any information about the potential for some sort of royalties to be paid by the publisher to the Bobby Sands Trust, of which the Minister is the director? Would there be anything in the grant conditions that would preclude that, or?
Generally speaking, one of the conditions specifically of lottery funding is that where any profit is made from a work, whatever that work may be, depending on the extent of the profit and the share, we would expect as a public body to get some money back in terms of the investment that we have made. So that would be one of our specific conditions for lottery. Obviously, the more successful something is, the more likely we are to get a return on what we consider to be our public investment. But I am unaware, and I'll check with my colleague, that any money from the publication is going to the Bobby Sands Trust, as you have asked.
There seemed to be a clarity around the fact there was no money going initially, but then the question seemed to be asked, would there be royalties depending on sales? I have no idea, but that's why I was
Certainly
asking.
we can inquire,
If we
Chair,
could, that would
come
be
back to you with an answer, because we're unaware of it at the moment.
right. And obviously, there would be an issue if if there were royalties paid to an organisation of which the head of the department was beneficiary and as a trustee of that. I think that was the point that they were trying to make. Okay.
Well, if I might make a comment on that, I mean, our first and the publisher's first responsibility would be to the author of the work, and then there would be a responsibility under the terms of the lottery grant that any profit that was made from the sale, particularly the retail of the publication,
right,
we would have, as an Arts Council, we would have clawback on that investment. So it would be a happy occasion, I suppose, for the publisher if that were to arise. But basically, we would have the first call on that, in terms of profit.
And if that other point could be clarified. Yes, sorry, yes.
Just to be comment, can I congratulate the Arts Council on supporting this project? It's been very popular and selling like hotcakes, so well done.
Could I just come back with a question there? In that particular publication, there was a eulogy, if you like, by the president of a political party, namely Sinn Féin, and Gerry Adams had a contribution to that. Is that an issue that would cause any concern to the Arts Council in terms of the widespread perception that if we have something that is directed, as the publisher himself said, at a younger generation, that type of publication, it could be seen as endorsing, supporting, promoting the activities in which the subject of the book was engaged.
Sure, maybe I might just say a word on that. I mean, the first thing to say is that as an Arts Council, we do not have, nor do we exercise, any detailed editorial role in relation to the artistic programme of any funded organisation. Now, obviously, we insist on artistic quality, on the careful management of public funds that we've invested, and we do maintain close contact with our funded organisations, but you know, we don't specify what should or should not be created or performed or written or whatever. But I think it's fair to say that it's inevitable that from time to time what is produced won't be to everyone's taste, and it's going to be the case that some will be offended by what is created. But as an Arts Council, we cannot only fund that which we like or of which we approve. And there's going to be many areas, I think, of artistic expression where there are contested interpretations or contested attitudes that might arise as a result. And really, I suppose that's our view as a public body. And we do fund a very wide variety of work, which is not always to everybody's taste, and from time to time it does provoke a controversy from whatever standpoint or viewpoint the person may have.
Under lottery funding in another area, the responsibility of the Arts Council to good relations has been cited. Yeah. Was it considered in this case?
We ask, Chair, all our applicants who apply for funding, when they apply for funding and when they're successful, to sign an equality of opportunity statement and indeed a good relations commitment. So we do that at the individual grant level, and I think we have to take at face value that which organisations are prepared to sign up to. And that's what we do. We don't monitor each individual organisation and their commitment to equality of opportunity and good relations, because we receive probably well over 1,000, 1,500 applications a year. It would not be possible for us to do that. But by and large, that is our requirement of funding, and we accept that.
And I think that there is, if I could add to that, Mr. Chairman, you know, there is an awareness, though, at the assessment stage all the time about, you know, the requirements on the Arts Council in relation to good relations. And one of the aspects that we have encouraged over recent years is that we're looking for inventive, imaginative approaches to the shared history, rather than just expecting the traditional means of memorising the past. And in that context, then, you get inventive ideas. These will be challenging. On some occasions, I recall a publication where an author had spent a year with Castlederg Young Loyalist Flute Band and produced a book then that was published by a publisher in the South. And again, that was a publication where people were asking, why is the Arts Council supporting this type of work? Well, because it had clear cultural value.
Okay. I'll just make a point and leave it then, because we're really under pressure of time. The particular book you're referring to was the Darragh MacDonald one about Castlederg, and that was someone coming from a different tradition, experiencing, exploring, whatever. And I think that is innovative. I wouldn't be so convinced with the other, but you've made the points there. You'll look into the issue about whether there could be some beneficiaries or some benefit flowing to the Bobby Sands Trust. And look, I'm sure it's an issue that people will return to in due course. Okay, thank you very much indeed, and I apologise for things being a bit rushed today.
Okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. we looked a little bit earlier at the statutory rule, and I just want to make a couple of points on that, and we'll probably return to it on Thursday then. There is, I understand, quite widespread concern about the content of this statutory rule. My understanding is it was not put through the executive, even though that it is cross-cutting. And I would have thought, without having gone through the detail of it, something of this nature would inevitably be potentially controversial, contentious. It has not been through the executive. It was rushed through at the end of last week by the Decal Minister, without the due process of coming to this committee. Well, they come to us with post-dated. So it may well be that we want to express our concern about the subversion of the democratic process in that way, and then maybe return to it with a little more information on Thursday. Do you want to?
Yes, Chair. Happy enough to leave it like that, but I would propose that we obtain that legal and procedural advice.
Yes.
Don't do a bit of harm, you know,
yes,
for ongoing cases. So, in fact, we know should this type of thing happen again, what options are open to us.
And, sorry, Mr. Humphrey. Oh, Mr. Humphrey. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm happy with what Mr. Cree has proposed and about the legal advice being sought. But made the point last week, and here I'm making it again this week, the latest in a long line of discourtesies extended to this committee by the department. And quite frankly, I think getting a legal opinion is one thing, but I want to propose that we bring the Permanent Secretary here to explain why this committee was not consulted or advised.
Right. Okay. We'll get the legal advice. That was the first part of the proposal. Members are able to get the legal advice. Members are able to get legal advice.
I don't know. I suppose you can get legal.
Okay. If you're proposing it, somebody to second it. Second it. All those in favour?
I think, Jenna, there's agreement on
right. Any against? No. Second point then was the proposal that we bring the Permanent Secretary here to explain the process and why the committee was excluded.
Chair, now the committee has had paperwork, it's just we didn't have
well, been excluded from the consultation. Consultation isn't on their website.
Then we should say.
Consultation is not on their website. We haven't seen it. I understand that it raises issues of concern from a number of sources. It is something that has not been through the executive, so we need to bring the Permanent Secretary here. I think probably as Mr. Humphrey has proposed. He's proposed that.
Chair, this has been in the mix since January, and it's there. It's saying that basically what it is the access for family members to information in a confidential fashion, whereby they currently have to. It can't be published under freedom of information, and sometimes the stuff is distressing and sensitive of it in its nature. So, I don't want to think that we are delaying this in any form or fashion.
It's as far as the committee is concerned. I think the primary issue is that it was something that we should have seen the results of the consultation. We've been denied access to that. So
I think the other point is, Chair, if it is something which is so important to people who need to get information, why was it done in such a secretive way, either by the department or by the minister, and not bringing it forward to the executive?
Thank you. Mr. Humphrey has proposed that we bring invite the Permanent Secretary to come and answer questions in that regard. All those in favour?
Yep.
All those against?
Okay.
4 and 2 and no abstentions.
No abstentions, no.
Okay.
We need all that.
Right, that's just quickly running through other matters arising then. Point 6.1, members refer to the Welsh Assembly's Communities, Equality and Local Government Committee report into the BBC Charter Renewal at page 134. That committee comes to many of the same conclusions as the CAL Committee regarding the BBC Charter Renewal, so it's helpful to get the perspective from across the water in Wales. Then brings us to correspondence. Members, there is the OFM-DFM Committee correspondence from the Office of the Northern Ireland Executive in Brussels, a report from the period November 2015 to February 2016. That's at page 149. Content to note.
Agreed.
And then point 7.2, referring members to the correspondence from the Environment Committee at page 161 regarding their stakeholder event on river pollution. The event held in February led to a motion for debate in the Chamber today. Members content to note. Their chairperson's business, there are no items of business to consider. We have the forward work programme, which is at page 205, Clark.
Chair, that's really just there for members to note at this stage. There's no significant change to that.
Okay. There's been no other business highlighted. We'll not be assisting. We'll meet again on Thursday, room 30 at 10 o'clock, and Peter May will be with us to give evidence on the Casement Park inquiry. And could I seek members' agreement that the meeting be adjourned? Thank you.